I heard you right, yes.
Good evening, Pavel Zarubin of Russian TV channel. It is no exaggeration to say that the whole world has followed your visit here with a series of reports and a series of publications. But it is clear that everyone understands that Russia's opposition to China depends to a large extent on the future of today's rapidly changing world. Now, after your talks here, I want to know in China that Moscow and Beijing have a common understanding. What should the future international security and political system be like?
But first of all, I would like to thank Chairman Conversion Singing Day and all Chinese leaders for their invitation. Create a very favorable, warm atmosphere. For a joint work that was created to work together on the whole, the talks were very meaningful, rich. Is this really like an official visit there or what state? But it's a purely work trip, no doubt. We spent almost a whole day from morning to night last night eating with the chairman and his colleagues, and many topics were raised for discussion. And what about? It depends on Russia, China, but the future depends. This is partly because the future of mankind depends on all mankind. But of course, both China and Russia are important parts of modern civilization. And we have our own views on how we should develop, and this development of ours will certainly affect the development of all partners on the planet. And development, we believe, should be. The guiding principle must be peace, which undoubtedly takes into account not only our interests, but also the interests of all participants in international communication. Of course, the emerging multipolar world needs to be strengthened. The fact that it is now in line with the world before our eyes is becoming multipolar. There's no doubt about it. I think everyone understands this very well. They know it.
Здесь нет никаких сомнений, думаю, что все это прекрасно понимают, отдают себе отчет в этом.
And it's important that those who try to maintain their monopoly on the world's decision-making on all issues understand that. And I think they're beautiful. Yes, I don't think, I know. They understand this very well, so that they understand this and do everything that depends on them in this case, so that the process is natural, once again peaceful, conflict-free, and that the views of all participants in the international process. It was fully considered, and all of us sought a compromise that was complex enough. The decision we all face is that we are determined to do this, that is, to do this kind of work. I have said many times, and the President of the Economy has emphasized our interaction, our cooperation, our strategic partnership. China, Russia, and China are not aimed at anyone, but at creating better conditions for the development of our two countries and improving the well-being of the people of China and Russia.
Good afternoon. If you may, the question is how your informal meeting was held, which, as your aide said, was held from top to bottom, but was attended in particular by Defense Minister Andrei Belousov and Security Council Secretary Sergei Shoigu. Did you mention Ukraine? Personally, what does Ukraine's readiness to negotiate look like? Earlier, you and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov have repeatedly said that Western partners can no longer be trusted.
Yes, such a meeting has been held, and the composition is very narrow. We really talked a lot. These issues are important to bilateral relations. On the topic of resolving the Ukraine crisis, the President of the People's Republic of China outlined to me the main points discussed during his recent visit to Europe and expounded his position on China's peace initiative. We have said many times that we believe that China is sincerely committed to solving this problem. It offers a variety of options, is very flexible, and in my opinion is sincere.
Китай искренне стремится к тому, чтобы урегулировать эту проблему, предлагает различные варианты, ведет себя очень гибко и, на мой взгляд, искренне стремится к решению этой проблемы. Мы обсуждали это достаточно подробно. Что касается наших контрпартнеров.
For example, in this case, this applies to the Ukrainian leader and his overseas masters, mainly European. Well, we've talked about it many times.
Прежде всего европейских. Ну что же, мы об этом много раз говорили.
When our troops were stationed near Kiev, we could not be told what our Western partners were saying.
Наших западных партнеров. Нельзя
If we have a pistol on our temples, we ask what to do to sign the document.
К виску приставлен пистолет. Что надо сделать? Было спрошено с нашей стороны. Мы спросили. Надо отвести войска.
We asked if we needed to withdraw our troops from Kiev, and we did it the next day. And they threw all our agreements in the trash and said, well, now we're going to fight.
До конца.
To the end, Westerners took a position on their curators that is now known to the world.
Известную теперь всему миру. Победить Россию на поле боя.
Defeating Russia on the battlefield will bring it strategic defeat. This is not how we behaved, this is how our partners behaved, and this is also what officials said, including the head of the Ukrainian delegation, during the negotiations in Minsk. Then the then Prime Minister, Mr. Johnson, arrived in Istanbul and advised Ukraine to continue hostilities.
В ходе переговоров сначала в Минске, а потом в Стамбуле приехал тогдашний премьер-министр господин Джонсон и рекомендовал Украине продолжать боевые действия. Иначе, сказал господин...
Otherwise, Mr. Arakamiya said he was the head of the delegation. Today he leads
возглавляет фракцию правящей партии.
the ruling party in Ukraine's parliament. So,
Иначе, сказал он,
otherwise, he said, all hostilities, the military, would have stopped a year and a half ago, because, according to me, he told reporters publicly at the meeting. In fact, I have no doubt about this. That is, let's draw a line under this part of the answer to your question. We have been deceived again, Uga. Now we must understand who we should deal with and how we should deal with it. We can deal with who and to what extent we can trust and... Well, of course, we're now analyzing everything that's going on in this regard, in this direction. Of course, we look at what is happening around the meetings we announced to civil society organizations in Switzerland, in Geneva. The garbage is collected on us. There is no formula, we don't know. Of course, we will not discuss it. But we have never refused to negotiate. Unlike the Ukrainian side, they have withdrawn from the negotiation process. They said they were going to give us a strategic defeat, and they said we were going to fight. In fact, not the last Ukrainian, which means they did it all with their own hands. We have the basis for the negotiation process of the maintenance. What we agreed in Istanbul and what we actually signed under the chapter of this lengthy document. He initialed it for the Ukrainian delegation. Our document is signed. What else is there? The additional conditions we have never heard of, know nothing about it. So, what is the point of this activity? It is clear that collecting as many countries as possible, then declaring that everything is agreed by everyone, and then showing Russia that this is a problem that has been resolved. How can there be no ultimatum for this development of events?
Let's leave Alexander Yonov. Let's continue the Ukraine topic. Yesterday, Zelensky visited Kharkiv, where he held a betting meeting while we were engaged in active fighting. Near Kharkiv, they are successful as soldiers, not ours.
No, they don't seem to be doing it, thank God, because they go strictly according to the plan every day.
So what is our goal of capturing Kharkiv, or is it to create the health zone you mentioned earlier? Thank you.
I don't know what I said there. Head of state, Kingdom of Ukraine. They just know that it's their fault in the end. What's going on? All today's Vlad, They're in Kiev. The source of their origin is Kups. This is the source of power in Ukraine today. 1, 2. Allow coup, Western sponsors contributed, organized and created the conditions for the transition from smoldering conflict to conflict. They are armed and responsible for this, trying to shift the responsibility of today's tragic events from a headache to a healthy one, and blaming Russia, but this is the result of their policies. As for what happened in the direction of Gorky, it was also their fault, because they shelled and unfortunately continue to shell residential areas in the border area, including Belgorod. Well, civilians are dying there. However, it is clear that they are shooting directly into the city center and residential areas, and I have said publicly that if this continues, we will be forced to establish safety zones and health zones. That's what we do. As for Kharkiv, there are no such plans today.
Hello, please allow Izvestia, please, hello. Dmitry Lavrova, Izvestia recently reported that Chinese banks are no longer accepting payments from Russian banks. Have you discussed this issue with Chinese leaders? If so, is there any result? And is it possible to agree on a possible settlement plan that will not be affected by Western sanctions? Thank you.
Third-party sanctions or sanctions against 3 countries. Participants in economic activities. Of course, they are twice and 3 times illegal, because if they are adopted without a decision by the UN Security Council, then they are not illegal in general. But for the 3 countries, this is completely beyond common sense. By the way, these sanctions are imposed by the same Americans or Europeans, even on their allies. Well, Europeans, then they apply sanctions to Americans, and Americans apply sanctions to European operators, often leading them to logical conclusions. This is only applicable to Russia, but it is applicable to other situations and other countries. Europeans, that means they swallow it all. Reaffirming once again its vassal dependence on the sovereign oceans, but God is with them, and that such decisions on them certainly directly damage the world economy, not only to the countries against which such decisions are made, but also to the economies of the operators of those countries, but the world economy as a whole, the energy industry, etc. What areas of activity in the economic field, especially those related to calculation, are discussed at the level of economic participants in decision-making and may exist? Of course, they must be supported at the national level in some way. I hope it will be understood. No matter how motivated the behavior of large financial institutions may be, no one wants to suffer any losses related to illegal acts, even if the authorities have illegal acts with SH. But I must say I've already talked about it. I want to repeat. This is a great folly and a great mistake for the American political elites, because they are doing themselves great damage, undermining their confidence in the dollar and gradually shrinking. They reduced the dollar to the status of the world settlement currency and reserve currency, although they benefited greatly from the dollar status, and the Lutsk system began to return then from the dollar, but then from gold means. Gold support for the dollar was rejected and transferred to the Jamaican system. What is it based on? Just a printing press? Or, for example, is it noble in the strength and quality of the American economy? Yes, it is. And many countries, all countries in the world, trust the strength and stability of this American economy. And they take these papers, but it gives a huge... At first glance, the inexplicable advantages of the US economy to the financial system can be estimated directly in certain figures. Well, according to our data, according to our experts, this is more than $10 trillion, not just money that fell from the sky by using the dollar as the world's reserve currency, but generally the debt to the US monetary system. In front of the other world, by legacy measures, it is about $53 for 10 trillion. But as the US authorities undermine the credibility of the dollar for political reasons, they are weakening their most important tool of power. The dollar itself is causing irreparable damage to itself. That is, in our famous saying, it is trivial. They just saw a branch, and their own stupidity was terrible. Well, they can't stop. There are disadvantages for us in being forced. Looking for other opportunities. Well, if it's an advantage, because this is a situation where one country dictates its will to the rest of the world, including in the political field, using financial and economic tools, it's unacceptable. And all countries in the world, I assure you, you only need to look at the amount of reserves, because they are reduced in dollars. This is the whole world's reaction to this. And I think this process is inevitable. Of course we are. We are moving, and this is the right process, and it involves certain costs, difficulties, but on the whole it is correct. When we talk about switching to our own currency for settlement or creating some other settlement tool with other countries, the process is underway and it has begun to stop. Vladimir.
Vladimirovich, may I?
Maybe.
Vladimir Vladimirovich, let me return to the topic of Ukraine and some of the initiatives of the West. But you have mentioned that you discussed this issue for a long time yesterday. May I ask, has the topic of Macron's initiative to declare an Olympic truce been raised? In your opinion, is such an Olympic truce possible now, or is it another attempt by the West to lure Russia into a trap, especially in the context of military success?
Yes, Chairman told me about it and we discussed it with him, so they just touched. Well, that's what I'm saying about this. One, that these principles of Olympism, including the Olympic truce, are very correct, and it's no coincidence that they've been developed by the international community for centuries. It is true that few people, except ancient Greece, have adhered to this principle, but in general, it is a very correct idea in itself, and it is a constructive problem in another way. The question is, what is today's sick? The current international sports officials violate the principles of the Olympic Charter and politicize sports themselves, which is completely unacceptable, referring to the purpose of sports as a platform for people to communicate and seek compromise. In this communication and on other issues, including political issues, and if they violate it themselves. Including in this case against Russia, they violated our national anthem by not allowing our athletes to perform at the Olympic Games with their own flags and national music, but they wanted us to follow the rules they had given us. No one thought of this. Would it fit? Stand. There is no such basic new norm of justice. They themselves violate it, but we are required to enforce it. But dear friends, so we won't be gone for a long time, will we? So no one has ever agreed on any issue. In order to ask or expect something from others, you need to abide by these rules yourself. But in general, sports, of course. It is developing, it will develop. I don't know how the Olympic movement will feel today under the leadership of such officials. If they put money first, and make it the most important thing. This means that the principles of its activities are the same as those of any commercial enterprise whose main purpose is to make profits. Now, if this is put in the first place, then the future of the Olympic movement will not be good at all because it has become a commercial company. Everything is based on what to get money from big sponsors. Broadcast information campaign. Well, in general, this is an entire business that profits from sports competitions, but it is still an Olympian principle, not a humanitarian principle.
Please, Alexander Kristenko, Russian channel, this week imposed tariffs on some Chinese products, including chips, semiconductors, metals, solar panels, and most importantly, Chinese electric vehicles, which have been quadrupled. My tariff is up to 100%. Can this be regarded as sanctions against China? And will Russia-China cooperation help well resist such attacks?
Well, sanctions, of course, look like sanctions to the outside world. But to some extent, these elements of economic war have been used more than once. And by the way, politicians have the nature of Russia-China relations. I assure you the situation in Ukraine has nothing to do with this. These are just elements of unfair competition. So we made the 21 aircraft here, so they defined the components that we agreed on, all of which had nothing to do with each other. SN military production, well, the wings there should have been inserted with certain components. So they just refused us everything, put on a sanctions list. And this list has something to do with military production, but it has nothing to do with military production. No, yes, we lost time. This production has been delayed for about 6 months, but we made these components ourselves and they live there. And the wings are done well, even better. Than American made in terms of quality and durability. The same result will be here. I just said at a meeting with students, why did I impose restrictions on China's electric vehicle industry like this? These are, yes, because they are better and cheaper than Europe and the United States. They are still just killing their competitors. In this case, Chinese competitors are not allowed to enter their markets. This is a prohibitive tariff, and of course the same thing is happening in Europe. This means that once a country, as we often say, is the center of world development, this is what any center that rises becomes more competitive to create and lower it. Trying to do it, can you? Can Russia-China cooperation resist this in some way? Maybe, but in order not to happen, the bees are interfering. In financial wiring, because we could have purchased more, but because of the problems in remittances, we are limited in purchasing these products. But can something be done with it if it can? We will develop joint production, which will take time, just as we did for aircraft components. Well, they moved everything there to the right for 6 months. Well, here we're going to do the same thing together. This is the most wrong and stupid way. A foolish path to building an international economic system. The most correct thing is what they've been telling us for a decade. If you can say that, I'm sorry for the move to that the market decides everything. But the market will still push them. Do you know what's going on? This is a problem of their own making. What would that lead to? So they imposed sanctions on these goods, these goods, these goods. Why does this lead to inflation in the United States? That's what it will lead to, because they will try to produce it on their own sites for their wages, their workers, their already expensive metals, their expensive energy based on their expensive energy. The result means that the German economy in Europe is almost negative, while the French economy is on the verge of recession. If the German economy still calms down there, it doesn't matter how well it should feel. The entire European economy will feel unhealthy behind it. Well, to put it mildly, this is what leads to this kind of decision, which is not a market, absolutely stupid, and has no prospect of a solution. Vladimirovich.
Commandant Andrei Kolesnikov, please tell me under what conditions can you still participate, so to speak, at the Ukraine Peace Conference in Switzerland? Of course, what if you suddenly received such an offer?
This means the same policy after all. If we don't go on, it can't wait for the inclination. You know, if there were other cases there, but if there were no, they wouldn't invite us. Besides, they say they can't see us there. What are we talking about? But if you do, we'll be exposed. But if you do this, if so, then we will make such a decision. But they don't see it. But 1-2, which is very important. Andrei, it's very important that we're not going to discuss with the center what we don't know. We told me that we had been in arduous negotiations for nearly a month and a half, first in Minsk and then in Istanbul, and reached some compromise. The Ukrainian side signed the squeeze of these documents, and he himself was fat and healthy on the squeeze. Therefore, the Ukrainian side has put forward the issue of principle, but we are now working on some formulas based on this. They want Christmas trees in the actual situation, but it's impossible to discuss, but we're ready to discuss. We never gave up. I told you now, this is no joke. I didn't come up with anything. As soon as the Westerners withdrew their troops, they told Ukraine not to sign. They fought, they put them under the sun visor, they performed. But we were immediately told, now we will fight to the end. Why did we say there would be no more negotiators? Now they see it doesn't work until the end. Maybe it will work, but it is impossible to cause Russia's strategic failure now. So they screamed, let's have an emergency meeting there, please, Russia will attend. We're going to take part in the peace talks, but we don't invite you. But the movies, Nihao, are here. Russia was accused of not wanting to participate, so we were not invited. Are you asking about such conditions? Well, if they don't see us there, what will I put forward and ask for there now? And what do they want to do? How many countries can be collected? Convince everyone that the best proposal is some of the conditions put forward by the Ukrainian side. And then show us this as an ultimatum. You see, the whole world thinks so, agree. Is this the way to introduce substantive, serious negotiations like this? But no, of course, it's an attempt to impose. So they tried to fail strategically, and the result of the attempt to impose would be the same.
But I still understand.
On yours, you and I.
Your condition is that the agreement reached must be an effort, yes?
Well, of course, this is a base, you know. They initialed the document to the end, and we didn't sign the document ourselves, and there were very serious problems. You know, the issues related to ensuring Ukraine's security there. They are so detailed that they should think about children, but in general, this is the basis. Well, they are stipulated by the Ukrainian side, and I think not least. Maybe, if not for dictation, then the consent of their Western sponsors, but then everything was strictly regulated from their interests. Considering Russia's interests in ensuring our security, there is something to consider. Well, there are a lot of questions. I don't even want to go into it. I don't have all of them, but I remember all the basic provisions. Well, we're going to discuss it, and then we throw it away, which means we can't gain an advantage on the battlefield, we can't achieve strategic position, but on those, our conditions have collapsed from the oak tree, or what? Why? This means that, of course, we will proceed from the reality that is developing on Earth, which is a matter of course.
Yes, Antonio Sharp, Channel 1. I talk about China and our hydrocarbon supply. Have we reached an agreement in principle on the Power of Siberia 2 project when construction starts next year? And in general, we talk about the possibility of increasing supply.
Yes. So, well, I'm not going to say the technical details right now, but both sides are interested in implementing these projects because China's economy is growing, it needs to increase the energy resources needed to maintain this growth accordingly. There's nothing more reliable than that. In my opinion, this is obvious. Nothing is more reliable than some supplies from Russia, but there is also a huge common border. No one here will interfere with sanctions, not even sanctions against the tanker fleet. We will buy and sell all this in local currency financial institutions, so the interest of both sides has been confirmed. On the one hand, it is interested in obtaining additional quantities, and on the other hand, it is interested in selling in the Chinese market. I think operators are always a complicated process. Our question is the price. The question is who will make how much money. But strategically, we are absolutely interested in both sides, and we have repeated the implementation of these projects, and we will do so. There, Gazprom, our oil company, will certainly agree on different routes there. One of them passes through Mongolia, and you can lay a gas pipeline and an oil pipeline in one corridor. Well, experts must decide how best to bribe the tanker fleet along the North Sea route and the North Sea pipeline. In fact, how to build a way. Everything is like a patrol. All of these options are possible. They are all acceptable and economically feasible. Choose the best you need. I believe this work will also be completed. Well, let's get the girl's bill, please.
Forgive the reality, but I also have a question about Ukraine, if possible. What?
Then Ukrainian.
Yes, please. Volodymyr Zelensky's term is coming to an end, and it will expire on May 20th. After that date, will Russia no longer consider him a legitimate president? And will that mean anything to you? Are you going to talk to him after that?
Have we talked to him before? The House has been in contact with how the conflict entered this acute phase of armed struggle, which means legitimacy. This question must first be answered by Ukraine's own political and legal system. There are various options in the Constitution, that's it. Evaluation problem. Of course, this assessment is first and foremost to be expected by the Constitutional Court, and in general, even from the bondage itself, Ukraine's own political system will say so. But of course, it matters to us, because if we talk about it, it will involve signing some documents. Of course, we must sign documents in such a decisive area. This is an obvious fact among Timmy authorities, but I repeat, he must answer this question again. Politics and Ukraine's own legal system. Thank you very much.
They discussed China's invitation to the international conference.
Now we have discussed this issue in a comprehensive manner. Thank you very much for mine.
French troops in Ukrainian.
I'm not the president of France. What are you sleeping? I don't make decisions.
He has repeatedly said he is ready to send troops there if regular French troops enter Ukraine. Will this mean a direct conflict war?
With the French, you have his square first. Will there be troops there to answer your question? Then we will consider the options for the consequences of this step.
Vladimirovich, but Belousov's figure. If you can ask, the last question. Why was Belousov chosen as Minister of Defense? Because now is still a very important moment in a special military operation, but...
I told you. He said, no, Dmitry Sergeyevich talked about it. He talked because I asked him to do it, and I want to repeat it again. This year, our defense spending level on the Ministry of Defense is only 6% and 7-10% of the P if you take the entire military.
То расходы на всю силовую составляющую выйдут где-то за 8%.
The cost of the entire power component will exceed about 8%.
Министерство обороны играет ключевую роль. То есть от расходов Минобороны
What about the spending system? The Ministry of Defense plays a key role, that is, the expenditure of other law enforcement agencies also depends on the expenditure of the Ministry of Defense, because the Ministry of Defense first makes some purchases, and other law enforcement agencies buy them according to the choice of the Ministry of Defense. In addition, the Ministry of Defense is building the entire national defense system with the participation of other law enforcement agencies, and their costs also depend on it. If this is all for Defense 6 and 7, but for the entire defense security, 8% over that is not critical, yet because the Jewish Union in 1985-6 defense spending is 13%. For us today, this is a factor. Not economic, macroeconomic indicators, budget revenue forecasts, defense and security spending, even if they add up to more than 8%, are not critical, absolutely normal. In addition, some experts believe that more can be added. According to these experts, budgetary possibilities allow, but they are what they are, so Andrei Ramovich, as you know, was the Minister of Economy, and he is generally considered a good economist, one of the best in the country. He was my assistant, again in economics. He is the first Deputy Prime Minister, and in this sense, he is certainly able to coordinate the activities of the Ministry of Defense with all ministries and departments of the country and regions. That's important too, and I mean not only border regions but others, because they're also a participant in economic activity, to some extent one too. What is he going to have to do? He should have disclosed the Department of Defense. In order to cooperate constructively with scientific research centers and economic activity participants in a broad sense, they are reproductions of these activities. Military technical products are components required for the production of military equipment. He should disclose the Department of Defense to innovate. Sergei Kujugetovich has taken some steps in this direction. I have taken the first step, but I believe that even considering his recent official duties, it is easier for the former Prime Minister of the Russian Federation to do so. Here. That's the reason for appointing this position, Sergei Kozhayedov. Do you see it all in public? He often goes to the enterprise. He sees, knows, understands what is happening, and knows the needs of the armed forces. In addition, in the medium and short term, he understands the opportunities of the industry. He also studied to some extent. Our son's contacts as a partner in military technical cooperation. Because the Federal Military Technical Service is under the Ministry of Defense, he actually introduced it, so he has a lot of work. And if you pay attention, it will all be combined. I support the idea of Denis Valentinovich Manturov as the first deputy in the government, precisely because we want to focus administrative resources on achieving the main tasks facing the country today. Achieve the results we need as part of a special military operation. Thank you.